Uh, please turn your video off during that time because I'm not editing the tape. So we're not going to talk about anything too dangerous, but you know, I want you
Don't talk.
warned. I ain't got time to edit some videotapes. So,
No.
so this is Enthinkment Circle, and we got a bunch of note takers in. A lot of times we have more AI note takers than people, which is kind of interesting, you know? And, and then they're always trying to sell me their note takers. Hi, Dylan, Young, yay. All right, we got doctoral students, professors, we got retirees, we got artists, and we got Jerry Bieberman. We can't classify Jerry Bieberman, you know. I'm sorry I kept that Disney shirt so long, Jerry. You know, that Mickey Mouse shirt, you remember that? I didn't return that for 10 years, you know.
Oh, well, it meant a lot to you, so I figure, okay, that's good.
So I'm going to ask you to borrow your shirt now, you
Oh,
know.
this one, they told me
Listen,
I,
Good luck.
I got this shirt for $20. I'm going to sell them for what, 40? And this the American way, just like
yeah,
Disney. Huh?
very cool.
That shirt you had, that one, the one with Mickey Mouse, is so true. It's more true now than it was back then. They have priced themselves out of it. You can't even afford to go there if you wanted to now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was looking at these entertainments for billionaires, you know, in Florida. I'm going, well, yeah, I think I'd rather stay home and read a book or get on a call or something, you know?
Yes. Might be the last one to read a book. I don't know. Nobody
Yeah.
reads books anymore. Nobody knows how to read and write
Yeah,
and spell. Nobody knows how to do math. Everything's on their phone.
it is. Well, today we got a big surprise for you. Big things are happening. I took a lot of feedback in from last week. Whoa, I got my ass handed to me. So you know, and they said, we notice that you keep changing up things every week. Oh, hi. Somebody's got a background there. I think it's you, Olivia. I'll mute you in love. There we go. Okay, so the feedback I got was, widen the love to the world and not just focus on veterans, but focus on any community that needs any organization, any family. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Enthinkment will be our think tank. And then once a month, I'm going to do a webinar. And it'll be that first Friday of the month. And I'm probably going to focus on love and spreading the love, in the webinar. And I think what I've got is some background I want to share with you today in today's session. And it's going to be about uh, some words you may or may not remember. and but I'll try to be gentle with you. Won't be too bad. I want to go back to the days when I was working with Louis Ralph Pondy in University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. I just got in the doctoral program. Here's a little story. I just got in the doctoral program and I said, I'm happy to meet you, Professor Pondy. Knocked on the door, went in the office, and he said, yeah, okay. What have you read? I said, well, I read your classic article in Administrative Science Quarterly on the episodic models of conflict. He said, yeah, but did you read the second half of the article? Most people don't read the second half of the article. They miss the whole point. People just cite the abstract. They don't really read anything. I said, yes, I remember it was about the difference between doing conflict management in bureaucratic and open systems and more organic situations. So he said, well, that's unusual. Where are you in the PhD program? No, I'm just a master's student. He said, well, how about you take my class? So he invited me to take his PhD seminar, and that was interesting because I barely finished high school, you know, and there I am. I did manage to graduate pretty high in a couple of places. But anyway, so I went into the PhD program for you all that are in PhD programs on probation eventually. They invited me in, not having the scores, having good grades, but at that time, good grades didn't count for anything. You had to have those GMATs, up in the 700, 800 range. I was, I had the same GMAT score as my track distance in high school, which is a 440. And so not only I wasn't making a cut, I was two standard deviations below the cut. And, but after the first year of taking PhD seminars, I was top of my class, and I ended up being the top graduate from U of I program at that time. Had the likes of Jerry Solancic, Michael Mock, Hans Huff, you know, some leadership guy I'll remember later. Um, all of David Wetton, all these people were heads of the Academy of Management, except for Mock, I think. Um, anyway, they got me my first gig at UCLA as an assistant professor. And at that time, I had to deal with conflict because I was being interviewed by both the strategy department from the sixth floor and the fifth floor phenomenology department of management. Um, and they hated each other. Oh my God, these people hadn't talked to each other in years. They just detested each other. You had all these qualitative phenomenologists studying Habermas, and then you had these strategists following that Theory Z guy. Remember the Theory Z guy? We won't mention his name. I call him Ouchie. This Ouchie, you know, uh, he called me midnight one night and says, after I was hired, and I didn't know the deal was already brokered by Lou Pondy and these people already. I thought I was managing my really cool presentation, but they said, nah, we had to deal with Lou Pondy at a basketball game. We already decided to hire you before you showed up. Anyway, but Ouchie called me one night at midnight and said, I'm in the strategy department and I work with Ollie Williamson, the economist. The dean's an economist. Um, we're going to go in economic direction, and anybody that's not going on that boat's not going to get tenure. So, what do you say you join the strategy department? I said, no. I wasn't brought in by this strategy. I was brought in by the phenomenologists, and I'm going to stay there. Sorry, I didn't get tenure. Thanks, Bill Ouchie, for that misery. But I did learn how to manage conflict. So what I want to do today is tie together two things. One is Louis Ralph Pondy's conflict model, which is the best in the world. I mean, it's a classic. Now, these empiricists from strategy, they try to empiricize it with numbers and scales, and that's never worked. Thompson, you know. But what does work is the process of the conflict episode. So I'm going to go into depth on it, but for now, I'll just say, have you ever been in a meeting where you got the same people mouthing off to the same people, ignoring the same people, bringing up the same bullshit that they brought up at the last meeting, and you want to just pull your hair out? That's how my hair got so long, just yanking on it. So that's a little introduction to the life in most universities, corporations, agencies, and quite a few families that you get around the dinner table and pretty soon the aunt and the grandmother and your mother start to go back and forth about what an evil person you are or something. It's the same reason I didn't want to show up for any of those gatherings year after year after year. Because it's really difficult to do something loving with the family. I want to start out by saying I was in a seminar last week, 5-hour seminar, I believe, with the insight people. Insight people, I don't know, how many of you ever had insight seminar? Okay, you're all, okay, Morns did. Morns, you had one over there in Denmark? You had one? Pretty cool. Yeah, they're international. And I took a seminar with 100 people after meeting Grace Ann, who said, no, I'm not going to get engaged to you, and I'm not going to go out with you anymore unless you go to the Insight seminar. It's a 5-day seminar. And then after I did Insight, I refused to do it for a long time. So she flew from Pittsburgh to LA, where I was living, and she took me through the seminar. She sat there and made me go through the seminar. It's like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week into the evening with homework assignments and all these exercises. And everybody was hugging each other. I was hugging men. I was hugging people I didn't know. I was hugging actors and actresses and stuff in LA. And okay, I'm just not used to that much hugging because my mom and dad never hugged me till I was 21. I mean, they were like stoic people, like, hi, David, welcome back from the army. Let's shake on that, you know? And here's all these strange. So I really love the hugging. I got into it. And what they want to do is create volunteers and they wanted some strategy. So they're talking to the right guy. And because I also was in the strategy group at UCLA. I didn't just abandon them. But anyway, the and your feedback last week is I'm pretty darn good at coming up with big ideas. Well, that's because I get up every morning at 4:30. What time? Anybody get up earlier than 4:30 in the morning? Raise your hand. Okay, Jerry Bieberman. That's because you never sleep, Jerry. And Paul, I don't know what you're doing at night, but you need to get some sleep. But I get up in the morning and just get going with, a big idea of the day. And that's why your feedback last week was so precious because you said, well, I've noticed, Jillian was saying that, my doctoral student now, PhD, said, I noticed that, PhD student come and meet you a year from now, and they won't know what the hell you're doing. They understood you a year ago, and the ones from 12 years ago understood you then. And Jerry understands me from C'est Moi, but hasn't been to see me recently. So I got to tell you that I don't stand still in my scholarship. I don't have those yellowed notes and stuff and all that. I mean, if I can't produce a new idea for each session, then I'm not worth my salt. That's after your body's dead and you just have salt left. So what I'm doing is I use Enthinkment to learn about Heidegger from like David Trofimo, who's got interesting hair. Looks like a woman, David does. And I learned from Bakhtin, from Betty Beeler, and Tomorrowland, and Marquis de Sade from Duncan, and Morn's Environmental True Storytelling, etc. And Olivia and Tom, we do the Growth OD, which I had to take a break and just I want to present a growth OD, but I don't want to run the darn thing because I got to run other things. If you have a big idea every morning, then you have to get out, figure out what to do. And then, I don't want to change growth OD, works well. And I don't want to change true storytelling because that works well. So I go to the think tank today with a big idea. So today's big idea is microstoria. Micro, like microscope. Storia, like Astoria, Storia. Now it turns out these are the Italians. There was four Italians, and I want to connect this up to last time I talked to you about pragmatism. So these Italians got very excited about two things: archives, going back into deep history. Number two, they got really excited about Charles Saunders Peirce pragmatism. That whole, this, not the whole of it. I mean, who could swallow that? But just, you know, induction cases, deduction, a theory about it, and abduction, a wild ass guess an intuition. So that's what that model, IDA, you know, induction, deduction, abduction, called IDA. I name all my theories. It's not mine, but uh, so IDA is real important to the Italians. Microstoria. Now, where do you find Microstoria? Well, how many of you claim to have read my 2001 book on communication methodology for uh, business and other organizations? How many say that they read that book? Like Ronnie read the book. Okay, when Ronnie read the book, he could tell me what chapter Microstoria is in because it's the third chapter and it's the whole chapter. And I started to notice, Ronnie, that there's about 20 publications, several of them with you, that deal with microstoria. Some with Usha Haley, some Ronnie and I, the book on Enthinkment, Louis Pondy, and then there's about 18 others. So, Ronnie, I put together a whole list of them with links for most of them, and they're on the antenarrative.com website. And they'll be at the end of this thing I'm going to show you today. So I thought, well, that's a heck of a lot of scholarship that most of you don't know about. Don't know about the Italians, don't know that they were into pragmatism, don't know that they were in Charles Saunders Peirce, don't know what microstoria is because I haven't explained it. So if you're thinking like, what's microstoria? Well, you're probably not going to find it on Google, you know? So here it is. They would examine history to find out the little people that were written out of history. Now, if that's not anti-narrative, I don't know what is. So they were people that, for example, a lot of studies that they were doing around Italy in Italian were to look at communities in Italy that had a few Jewish people in them around the turn of the century, and they had stores and whatnots. And how did they survive in a whole Catholic city, right? Look at the resistance and pressure there, that love-hate relationship between a dominant ideology of Catholicism and the the few families that were together around Judaism. Now, that's not the only thing. They could go in another community and look at the Muslims in a community, or they could look at um, people who did things like Olivia, Tom, and I, and with intuitive, like, we're very intuitive people, and I could read a tarot card to you. Well, okay, that would get you uh, into a witch hunt in Salem, USA, and in parts of Europe. There were a lot of women hunted down who had high intuition or who were accused of it and didn't have it, not necessarily had these kind of transcendent skills. But that was the kind of thing, and they did it archivally. Now, there's some interesting things about um, this whole thing. Um, What I wanted to do for the first breakout is to have you identify a microstoria example from your own life. Not from your life, you're too young. I'm too young, but to go to your ancestors. Um, so, for example, there was a special issue in that journal that Jerry's a board. You still a board member of Management, Spirituality, and Religion, Jerry? You remember back, they accepted a special issue on my grandmother, Wilda. Yeah, and then people from St. Maur wrote critiques of it and other kinds of things. So it was a whole special issue. So Wilda, my grandmother, um, I learned about her. I met her a few times growing up because we didn't visit her very often, but I met her and she was always letting me smoke cigarettes. Now that's not a good thing for a child to give a child a cigarette, but she was very liberatory with me. You know what I mean? She was like, "Yeah, you want to go chase rabbits? You want to draw a picture? You want to pour the lemonade on the ground? Whatever you want to do, David." Little Davy. They called me Davy then, Davy Crockett. They call me Davy. And so my mother told me her story of Wilda when I was 54. She said, "Well, she embarrasses me." And I said, "Well, show me some pictures of that you have. I know you got some." She took out a shoebox and she took out the picture of Wilda, her mother, my grandmother, and ripped it in half. I said, "Okay, she's got some." I'm thinking like a coach now. This woman's got some negative feelings, negative thinking, and some weird actions going on about her mother. I said, well, "What's that?" She said, "Well, she's embarrassing. She's embarrassing. She uh, she embarrassed me. She could ride a horse, and in a rodeo, she was a trick rider in the rodeo in Goldendale, Washington, and she could throw a stone at 50 paces and take down a rabbit or a squirrel and cook it up. And she lived in it with a dirt floor way out in the wild." And I'm going like, "Wild A, Wilda, they were way out in the wild. This is great. Tell me more. Tell me more. And so the microstoria there is to understand the time of the deep hatred for Native Americans in our country at that time. There was the time of the Overland Trail. It was just Grandma Wilda would have been a couple of years old and crossing from Kansas, a covered wagon, to Washington State off the Oregon Trail at a time when the railroad is already running. So if the railroad's already running, what does that mean? They couldn't afford railroad tickets and they're still taking a covered wagon, right? And as farmers, they're trying to go to Washington State and start a farm, right? Well, the farm went belly up. And so we're starting to manage a livery stable and moved into town. And then Wilda, when she got to be just a teenager, started to ride horses because she'd ridden them before, but now she's doing trick riding in the rodeo to make a few extra cash. She married a miner, a sheep herder named Raymond. I named my son after, and he was a bootlegger. Now, why was he a bootlegger? Because he's a bad guy? No, no. See, when you do a microstory, you don't interpret the past based on your standards and ethics now. You interpret the past by what the standards and ethics were in the past. That's why it's called archival work of microstoria. So when you do that, you're not a postmodernist. Microstorians were history people that didn't like postmodernism, didn't like modernism, didn't want interpretations that went against what the idea, metaphysics, Sabine, metaphysics of the time were, that you can't use these metaphysics and be a microstorian and go back in time. There's no going back to the future and then coming back with that perspective on the past. So that doesn't work. So just to give you a couple of examples of microstory and my ancestors, and I'll ask you to share. Um, so my mother, I'm 54, she says, "Yeah, and Wilda's brother was beaten to death by the sheriff and the deputy sheriff in Goldendale, Washington." Well, okay. And that's because he married Stella LeClaire from a Native American tribe, and they had a daughter named Georgia. And I got a picture of her, and I managed to take it out of my mother's hand before she ripped that one in half too. And and so what I'm tapping into here is just how much hatred my mother still had for these violations of the social cultural norms of the time, right? And then I'll give you one other example because microstoria is something I want you to love and get to grasp and understand. So I'll give you one more example before I turn you loose. Um, so the stepfather of my mother was named Percy Brown. I don't think Brown was his actual last name, nor was it Percy, but he was put in a Native American school and ripped away from his native uh, roots, Native American roots. And his brother was taken by the mother. So this is something the mother did to the two sons. You know, two sons about the same age, kept one and got rid of one because couldn't afford the both of them. I mean, we didn't have a real health plan back then. You know what I mean? You either survived or died. So one went to California and became vice president of a big conglomerate company in oil and gas. I don't need to even say which one. And the other brother stayed in Native American school, the missionary school, got his hair chopped off, couldn't speak his language, that whole thing for about, oh, 2, 3 years. So didn't have much education in that time, but skedaddled out of there, was really good with animals, became later a forest ranger, married Wilda when she was a telephone operator. And in addition to doing the rodeo, she would have been maybe 18, you know, and had enough of Raymond the bootlegger being gone all the time and living in a shack in the woods. So, you know, at that time, a telephone operator poked a cord into, you know, a board and pulled it out and then put another one in or put two together. So to hook up a call and you were on these parts. Well, anyway, she did that kind of work and married Percy Brown. Um, Now he's a stepfather now. Now some stepfathers are not that good a parent. Okay, they didn't get a license to be a parent. He should never have been a parent. So my mother spent a lot of times in the woodshed, and I think Sabine, I told you this before. And then my mother wouldn't say what went on in the woodshed, but you got a woman that's not comfortable in her embodiment, not comfortable about sex, not comfortable around men, can't hug her own children, and is mad as hell her whole life at men, including me. So then, just to wrap that story up, what does she do later in life? She's living in a double wide in Washington State, and her sister, you know, one's a stepsister, one's a sister, you know, they're lit. She gave him property to her sister, Val. Now, Val's this wonderful character. She smokes pot. She's got one boyfriend after another. She loves to drink. There's my mother, always fixated on the home shopping channel, has the catalogs next to her, ordering things. She wants to be that perfect suburban housewife, which is why my dad left her. And then Val is this dancing loose. Taught me how to make gas house eggs. If you'd ever made, when you take a piece of bread, cut the hole out with a shot glass in the middle, crack your egg in there. I mean, she was fun to be around. You know what I mean? So why would two women that hated each other their whole lives live next to each other? You know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying family conflict. I gave you example of corporate conflict, give you example of community conflict, ethnic and religious conflict. So what am I talking about here? I'd like you to go into breakout. If you have any questions, I'll answer them, but and tell a story of your ancestors, not yourself, your ancestor. And a microstoria of that ancestor. Can you do that for me? And then we'll come back and talk about Louis Pondy and the episodic model and how the insight group wants to have volunteers go into community. I can hear you, Tom. Did you want to ask something? Oh, you got a nice kiss on the head. That's good. I got that on TV. So, yeah. So, anybody have any questions before I put you in the groups? You want a slicker definition, or what do you want? I know some people like to have. My dad taught me to swim by throwing me off the dock, saying, "Swim or drown, buddy." Morns. You have to unmute your button, click on your photo, and there's a button on the left.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not so old, so that I have so many ancestors. But I, I, I want to ask you. I have some. I've lived in Greenland for 4 years, and
Wow.
now I'm traveling with the original people from Greenland. And there, I actually learned some kind of micro stories told by their ancestors, and then when I bring them home to Europe. Or to that, then we can actually see some those stories I have collected. Is that okay? Because I'm not in contact
Well,
with my own.
I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy, Morns. No, it's
Yeah,
not okay. You need to like to deal with your own some ancestor that
yeah,
lived somewhere that taught you to be a blacksmith, and because I know you're a blacksmith, nobody
yeah.
taught you, so you must
No,
have. Who is your grandmother? Tell me about your grandmother.
I don't know.
You don't know your. Okay, I'm sorry. You raised in an orphanage. I didn't mean to bring that up.
Oh
Maybe.
yeah, exactly. So actually, so that it, but I was actually I when I travel in Greenland, I feel that I was in contact with some people that lived for 100 years ago because they were living in a different environment and they were still living as your original people in US. And I was in contact with
Okay.
those.
All right.
Actually, they have cultural meetings and they have, but that is not what I hear what you want to. So I just want to clear that up.
What about your father? Do you know who your father was?
Yeah. He's a mechanic.
What about his father? Do you know his father?
Yeah, I
Okay. What
do.
about a story about your grandfather?
I don't know.
Okay, think about it a minute. I'll give you a minute to think about a grandfather story, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
And
Okay.
and then if you can't do it, I'll come in your breakout room and help you out, you know?
Duncan has a question.
Duncan, are you gonna say something?
I've got one question. You said something that I thought was really interesting, and I wondered if you could talk a little more about it.
Yeah,
You
whatever.
mentioned that microstory and postmodernist were like at polar opposites.
Oh, very big, very big. Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little more about that? That
Yeah,
seemed
if you think in the book on the communication methodology, whatever I named that thing back in 2001, um, there's a chapter on grand narratives, and it's all about Lyotard, Jean-Francois Lyotard. And so the grand narrative, and he's like one of the key figures in postmodernism with his book that came out 79, I think, in French, 84 in English. And it's all about let a thousand little stories fly, you know. And it was a critique of the grand narrative, which I really, really appreciate. But it also has in it, though, the the idea that there's a postmodern like epic, and then there was a modern epic and a pre-modern epic. So that chronology of time, chronotopic time, is something that the microstorians don't buy into. Now, he wasn't that extreme in it. Jean-Francois Lyotard, I actually used his stuff in the Disney article in 95 on the Tomorrowland article. Nobody, like Lou Pondy said, nobody ever reads the second half of your article. It's only they take one line. You know, most of my citations are from the first sentence I write in an article. And that's where I'll get like 3,000 people saying they read this. Well, they didn't read the article. They read the first sentence
Well,
of the
we
first
still haven't figured
paragraph.
out who's more popular, Jesus or Mickey Mouse. We're still
Yeah, that's
exploring that
right.
question.
That's the sentence. Well, that wasn't the first sentence, but it's pretty. It might have been the first sentence, Ronnie. It might have been. And then, but the whole idea was that he's looking at the difference between a totalizing narrative and a bunch of what I call anti-narrative fragments. So he has that in there. So I forgot the question you asked about.
Oh yeah.
It's because I'm 78, dude. I'm the elder here, you know?
No,
Well,
I thought this was
maybe Paul is older. Sorry, Paul.
no, I
What
thought
was
this was interesting, like this divergence
Oh, the
between
postmodern.
narrative
Yeah,
and
because
documentary.
most the stereotype of postmodern is you're entering into another era and it's past modern. But then the guy Bruno Latour wrote, "We've never been modern." So if we've never been modern, how could we be postmodern? Because he's saying we never achieved that clarity of modernity promised by Enlightenment. So therefore, you can't be postmodern if you can never even achieve modern. But that part of it doesn't bother the microhistorians because they're going back in time, but they want to use the ideology of back in time and not some postmodern relativism, which they hate the most. Um, but I don't think they read Leotard too clearly, you know, or anybody French probably. Just guessing about that. Uh, anyway, I'll give you a coverage of the historians afterward. Any other questions before breakout? So we can go just say 6 minutes, three each, and pick a story of a grandparent, a great grandparent, a granduncle, a grandniece, something, but not you, but something back. Okay, let's just do it instead of talking about it. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see. So 6 rooms. Yeah, okay. Yeah, 6 rooms ought to do it. I'll make 7 rooms, put all the camera in one room. Okay, so reading notes, move to 7. Okay, so that'll be move to 3. Move to, I got to move all the cameras around. So move to, I lock all the cameras in one room. I think that's fun. 2. Yeah, that ought to be good. Okay, so let me move home to 2. Okay, and let me move. Okay, and let me move. Yeah, that'll work. That'll work. So, yeah, that's all looking good. Okay, so I think I'll move to, yeah, 5. Okay, so I had to have one room with 3 and the rest with 2, and I'll stay in the, now try to push the button that says join, but then when you're in the room, don't push any buttons because 3 people have just bounced out and we had to create a lobby room last time. So just push join. Don't touch anything after that, okay? Join. So you should find a join button. Very good. And Chris, do you find your join button? And wait there until I find you. And then, okay, so Olivia didn't join. So when she comes back, have her join. And I will, Olivia, go ahead and press join. You're in room 4, please. And then that'll all work. Okay. Okay. Got it. Welcome. I'm in here with several people that have recorders, at least Ernest, note taker. Hi, Ernest. Um, I'm in here to say hi, and I hope you're having a good time. And I'm going to check on people in other rooms to see if everything is going well. And we're doing Microstoria breakout, which means each person is sharing a story about their grandparent, or great grandparent, or great uncle, great niece, something great in their ancestry. And microstoria means that you cannot use the ideas or ethics of this time period, the ideologies, etc., but you have to respect the time period idea system that was there and get in touch with that. And so that's what makes microstoria unique. It's also very archival. It's also very pragmatist, follows the Charles Saunders Peirce approach to its methodology, collecting cases from the past, so that's induction, and collecting, um, uh, records from churches, records from city halls, things like that, from ancestry, photo albums, if they have such things, and trying to reconstruct that time period for that distant set of people. Okay. And there you go. There's supposed to be another note taker in here too. So I'm really happy that both of you are there. And so that's good. And so I'm going to visit some other people, see how they're doing, and just go and join. And I'll be back a little later if you need.
What I kind of think that he passed on to me was.
Okay, welcome back from our breakout where you got in touch with your Microstoria. So, at least I hope you did. I visited a couple of places. I went to the AI room and told them some stories so they wouldn't be lonely. Anyway.
David, what is the AI room?
Oh, it's where these AI people that don't come to the meeting send their AI note taker.
No.
That's true. So I try to put them all in one room. The AI is talking to each other, but they're very silent.
Hilarious.
Very
Wait,
shy
those things are
AI.
talking to each other? Those AIs are
No, I'm
talking
just
to
talking to them. No, they're not talking. They're just listening. They're just
Okay.
listening. So go ahead, Betty, Duncan. One of you start for your room, would you, or choose somebody?
Are we looking for the synthesis of the two, or how it went?
No, we're not up to that point.
Okay.
Tell your own story, not anybody else's. Not the whole story. We ain't got time for that. But what did you learn about Microstoria? How about that? What did you learn about Microstoria?
Yeah, well.
And I'm going to mute somebody who. There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Olivia, you keep eating because we love you. Okay, go ahead.
I want everybody to understand that this much of me is just swollen. I had a molar taken out.
Oh.
And roots that were corrected here. So, but I saw that I could talk. Paul and I came up, we hit a wall. We both wanted our stories to be developable. We wanted them not just to be a finite unit. He wanted to ask me more about mine rather than going into his story. And we realized that the kind of people we are is to go beyond the micro story. Yeah. But anyway, what I really loved was we both had ancestors that had problems and weren't appreciated. You sort of influenced us, David. But I had an Indian in my family who, when she came back from the Civil War with one of my great-great-grandfather, everyone said, oh, no, this is awful for the family. And in Paul's case, there was a case of what his grandfather from Swiss Germany. No, we're
Okay. So just a caution, please don't share anybody else's stories. Stick to your own.
Okay.
Okay.
So what I loved was the way the two fit together. We actually got more together on what we learned from the two fitting together. So just know that the things that my story contained were very relatable to Paul's story.
Super. One of the doctoral students, would you like to volunteer and share something? I'm just hopping around. Did the microstory work? Chris, go ahead.
I'll give it a shot. Yeah, so talking with Ronnie, kind of dug a little bit deeper into my family's past. So my grandpa fought in the Vietnam War. He was with the South, and he met a individual who was with Mac VSOG, and kind of thinking about their experiences and what they've shared because he remained a close friend of the family, and some of the traumas that they endured during that turbulent period. And, as my family came over from overseas by boat, they faced the unpleasant social interactions that, the society for the time period had stigmatized Asians. I'm of mixed Asian descent. I'm Chinese and Vietnamese. And I have Japanese family members, and something that kind of culminated all of them together was that hate and their decision to stand together and fight for civil rights. That's more of a broad overscope, but as as I could continue to kind of deconstruct some of the elements of what they endure and some of what they're willing to tell me, I really see how hard they had fought both in war and for their own civil rights and liberties here. And, I'm quite grateful. And I think it's an insightful reflection exercise.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Lawrence, did you find an ancestor? Did you find one?
No, I didn't, but I actually heard a very interesting, inspiring story from Tom, and when he talked about that, I come up with some of my own stories that had been told in my family, but I'm too old, I'm too young to this, so
Too old, too young. Okay, which is it?
I'm still cooking on it.
Okay, Morns. Okay. Yeah, Morns and I did a workshop together in the northern part of Denmark. And that guy Kenneth had us go out on the tip of the thing where the two oceans have waves together. And they said, "Oh, David, just take off your shoes and socks. This will be really refreshing as you step into the water." Oh my God, it was so cold. I may have Danish ancestors, but I'm not Danish anymore. That's enough, you know? So, how about you?
Then you could maybe learn to be a Viking. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. And I don't want to call on people, but I will. Jerry Bieberman, I'm just so happy to see I'm going to call on you. So, did you get anything out of this, or do you want to reject it?
I thought it was very good, but I did have one observation when it was mentioned about the anti-narrative, and everything we were saying seemed to be a narrative. So I don't know what the hell the difference is. But aside from that, so in my case, I was talking about my grandfather who came over from Russia. He was actually in Moscow at the time of the Russian Revolution. And he was Jewish, and him and his brother came over to the United States. But one interesting thing was neither one wanted to have anything to do with religion. They refused it. In fact, when I was bar mitzvah, my uncle refused to, my grandfather's brother refused to even enter the synagogue. So he was really upset with that. They wouldn't have anything to do with Hebrew, but they read the Jewish newspaper, which was using Hebrew letters. And then when they got over here, um, my father, it turned out, had been a member of the Communist Party, but absolutely refused to tell any. He denied it totally. He never was involved with the communists, had nothing to do with it, although apparently he was. And I think my grandfather might have been too. But they refused to talk about that stuff. And the other thing that came up for me is just all the anti-Semitism going back how many centuries, which is the reason that my grandparents came over here in the first place. I'm sure they met just as much anti-Semitism here as over there. So.
Some things, yeah. Thank you, Jerry.
Could I offer my thoughts on narrative and anti-narrative?
Oh, just one second. So Jerry's going to be speaking in 2 weeks, I think it is, and Sabine is next week. But go ahead, Ronnie.
I'm really looking forward to that.
I think just one. It seems to me that the anti-narrative must be the narrative's end.
Well, I got a rebuttal to that, which I'll bring up later. Go ahead, Ronnie.
So the end is never the end. The end is the beginning is the end. If we have a bunch of things that might be the way we tell the story, but they haven't become coherent yet, we're in antenarrative. Yeah. Once we make it coherent, it becomes narrative. One way I've seen people try to operationalize this is through terse narratives as ways that you can see the antenarratives in practice. But really, it's a theorization of what happens before sense can be made through some meaningful narrative.
Okay. I'm going to move along and show you the next part of this because I really want to get to the Louis Pondy stuff. Can I move on? Or if anybody's burning and they want to share something, Tom, do you want to share something or are you just waving your finger? So you're okay. Can I move on? Is that okay? Is I want to talk about why I think this is an important marriage between a microstoria of our ancestors and to be able to do the insight love thing, opening the heart of the insight and working with families. And I know it's really seen it heal in my family. I've seen it. I've used it in organization work. I wouldn't have become teacher of the year all those times without insight training. A lot of the practices I used, I mean, it was phenomenal. So I want to show you that, if that's okay, and appreciate what you've done so far. So let's see if we've got let's see, that's notes. Yeah, I think that's the document. And they want me to do all these things all over again, which I'll do. And that should work. Okay. All right, so you should see on your screen, do you see that where it says session guide? Okay. Is it too small for you? I could try to make it a little bit bigger. I don't want to lose contact with there. Is that big enough for you? Microstorytelling, microstorying. Now I'm going to make up a new theory. There's nothing more fun than making up a new theory. So the new theory I'm going to make up is called microstorying. I love to add ing to words. Other people have, hi, there's my daughter Renee. I just told really cool stories about your ancestors. I'm glad you weren't here to hear them. It would have been embarrassing. So, it would have been fun. So we're talking about, I'm doing the session guide now. So storying, Renee was going back to our ancestors, like my grandma Wilda, who I talk about a lot in sessions, and my mother's relationship with Brownie and all of that. I didn't tell any daughter stories because you're supposed to go back to grandparents and before. So anyway, I've got some background here. I'm not trying to show off, but I did get an OD award I'm ranked in Google Scholar, so I'm not worthless in that part. I'm emeritus in MSU. I'm visiting at Fisk University where Duncan is, so I always want to shout out to Fisk University. Published, I don't know, 45, 50 books, 150 articles, so that's just junky data. But I am co-founder of Enthinkment and True Storytelling, Growth OD, Purview, etc. And I did get a professional coaching degree from Genius Unlocked, which doesn't allow me to hold seminars. But since I have a PhD anyway, I don't need that permission. So, and the insight, that's my insight training, 1, 2, 3, and graduate, and at least 4 times as an assistant at other seminars held in El Paso. Took those insight seminars with Raz. I had 100 people in the group for Insight 1 and 2. 3 was a little bit less. I guess it was an excursion into the woods with tents and stuff. It was about 50. So big groups, and man, it was fantastic. The reason I'm prefacing that is because the Insight people want to have volunteers to work with conflict. And I said, well, sign me up. And then I started thinking Microstoria, Louis Pondy, and that's how this is kind of bridging together. So we did number 1 there, strategic foundations, a little bit about the Italian pragmatists. Let me just show you a illustration that I did today. Kind of the unstructured living stories, the antenarrative, the relation to true storytelling. Many of you are graduates of the True Storytelling Institute. Some of you are not, but the beneath, before, bets, the Abba. I don't know why they have that A in there. I don't know. But anyway, it's kind of a cool looking graphic. It's on the websites. You'll find it. But today is about beyond the big story, the power of microstorying. So I want to call it microstorying as an action, as an intervention, as a liberatory activity of peace and conflict settlement. Moving on. It also has a little bit of quantum storytelling, which I won't go into today. There's some restorying, but I like the layout here of the wheel of life that I talked about last time, the restorying that I've talked about before, quantum storytelling that's in the annual conference. Grand narrative we've talked about today, the difference between microstoria, the little story, and the grand narratives. So that's all there. And again, those are on the website here for the storying spiral. So here you have a diagram. Let me make it a little smaller so it fits on the screen. And the idea there is, can we de-escalate conflict in families, in organizations, etc.? So it's to get past the war stories in red there, the red spiral, the blame games. We know that a lot in coaching, etc. And interests and needs that are very individualistic, as Greg Cahete always talks about at the annual conference. So what does that leave us with? Dialogue and heart stories, which comes out of the end. So I wanted a spiral diagram, so I got that. But let's just talk about the difference between microstory, the little story, and the macro grand narrative. So structurally, the linear, the history, the focus, the power dynamics, the data selection, the temporality results are all different. So those are dimensions I've started to play with in the last couple of days. When I go making a new theory, I go quick. I go bam, bam. Let's pull it together and get the big picture going. So basically, one's linear. It goes back to Aristotle's 6 elements of what a narrative is, leotards, etc. The microstory is nonlinear, multivocal, fragmented. It's got that polyphony in it that Betty Beeler talked about. So I'm not going to go into any depth on that because I just wanted to introduce you to the 4 Italian microstoria people that are in my chapter in that 2001 book, chapter 3. So Carlo Ginzburg, Giovanni Levi, Carlo Boni, Eduardo Grandi. And my wife's Italian. I'm not, so I'm not pronouncing those right. Forgive me. So, but they are all interested in the pragmatism. We had a breakout, so we did that. Now I'll introduce you to Louis Pondy's model. This model is featured in quite a few pages of the book with Ronnie Sailors on the management thought of Louis Ralph Pondy, the Enthinkment Path. His dissertation was in 1966. He published his article from his dissertation in 1967 in the Administrative Science Quarterly, which at that time was the premier journal of the Academy of Management, so way surpassing the childish stuff that was in the Academy of Management Review or the Academy of Management Journal at the time. Now the roles have kind of switched. But anyway, at that time it was, and Lou Pondy was the associate editor of ASQ when I was a doctoral student, and Carl Weick was the editor. So this was a very big deal. Now, in going through his dissertation, the thing that's different from the dissertation to the published article, and I have a critique, that big arrow that flies around on the right and loops up, they left that out of the article in the journal. Okay, that's probably the most important arrow in the history of conflict because it shows that there's a loop going on. So again, the story is you go to a meeting, you got people arguing, one gets their way a little more than the other. You have the department meeting the next time around. Those people are still trying to hassle with each other. One didn't got a little more ground than the other, and this are going to make sure that that other person, they keep knocking them off, keep tripping them, making sure that they're not going to get their way. And then this meeting, then you go to the next meeting, the other one, starts to do the same thing. So now you got a group, let's say you got 12, 18 faculty, which I had in my department meetings, and you got groups, about 5 different subgroups, each trying to get their way on curriculum, teaching schedules. You understand that conflict is just a part of life in an academic institution or a corporation where it's divisions arguing, asserting their way or having their hidden agendas, et cetera. So let's go through the model because it's very, very powerful. Let's make the model a little bigger for you. Does that work? A little bigger, maybe? No, don't want to lose it off the page. Okay, so let's just deal with the center ones. You have the aftermath of the last meeting. So that's a conflict episode. It's still steaming in the air. People got in coaching, we call it the negative emotions, the negative thoughts, right? The bad behaviors. Those are still lurking there, and they're going to enter the next meeting. So when that meeting happens, you have latent conflict. It hasn't gone up to level of spoken and may not even be in the body language. And you could have some environmental influences like less enrollment in the state of New Mexico or something would intensify the conflict in our department meetings. Then you go to felt conflict, like I really feel it in my gut. I can cut it with a knife, the tension in the room when I'm in the room. When I interviewed as department head, 2 women were, one woman was crying in her office, like, I can't believe it. I'm the only Latino here, and I've been on every committee. Next month, I'm up for tenure. These bastards aren't supporting me. I can't take it. And another woman was in there, and she was going, those dirty, rotten bastards. I hate the fuck out of them. I'm going, I'm glad to meet you. This is my wife, Grace Ann. I want to be your department head. Maybe I don't, you know. Can you imagine that much hostility in an academic community? Yes, Duncan can. He's laughing his ass off, but he's not going to tell you the stories because he can't. Then you have perceived conflicts. You perceive it, and maybe the suppression mechanisms of the institutions are there because you know that I am a department and I'm going to give you a bad evaluation. You don't behave in the meeting, right? So we can suppress some of the conflicts. And I can draw attention like the way I did was divide them up into subgroups so they could not argue as a total group, but have some affinity groups. So I could suppress and focus attention that way. Then you have manifest conflict that breaks out. Can you imagine two academics, full professors that hadn't spoken to each other in 12 years in a meeting together, wouldn't say a word to them, ignored them? How do you have teams in that kind of environment? So that's a manifest conflict breaks out when, while they're not talking to each other, and there's other ways of manifest talking breaking out. Like I've been in meetings where a faculty member hits me. Like, don't hit your department head. I mean, that should be a basic rule, you know? Don't slap them. Don't yell at the top of your voice. Don't throw the chair down. Don't throw the chalk at the board, you know? Don't throw the eraser across the room at the other colleague. These are children. These are grown children. So that's manifest conflict. And then you have conflict aftermath. And as a department head, you know that you're going to have this same meeting in a week about curriculum or about scheduling or about the requirements of not overusing the Xerox copier machine. You know, it's going to be something there, right? I'm reliving it now. I need some coaching to pull me down, you know? Now, the other boxes we didn't look at, you have strategic considerations on manifest conflict. For example, the university is going through a budget crisis again and again and again every 8 years. So, and they had a chancellor and a dean that their job was to get rid of people. So they introduce conflict. So more manifest conflict is going to be legitimized in your meeting, right? Because they want to drive people crazy, so they leave and retire to cut the budget. I'm just speaking reality here, okay? I don't mean to alarm you, but try to consult in academic institutions is one of the hardest jobs in the entire world. And I'm sorry, but I don't know any of these four-step consulting models that are going to work in academia because it's just a hotbed of conflict. The other one I didn't mention was extra organizational tensions. So you have rivalry between departments, like I was talking about at UCLA. UCLA, they should be a peaceful bunch. They're the elites. Strategy should get along with marketing, should get along with accounting, should get along with the consulting group of what were we? Oh, those phenomenologists, right? No, no, it's like a Ferris wheel. You're on top of the Ferris wheel, but the wheel's going to turn, and if in a month or a year you're going to be at the bottom, and other groups are going to be getting the resources, have all the ear of the dean. Okay, I hope I've given you some understanding of why this is an important model. Now, how does it work in families? In families, you have the same dynamics, right? Dad comes home, gives me a new bicycle. Ah, it's not new, it's reconditioned bicycle. My mother has a fit, punches him in the nose. He starts to bleed all over the carpet. He takes her to the ground and bleeds all over her face. He's not a kind of a punching of women guy, but he is kind of a guy that will embarrass the heck out of you. So that was my birthday. So what was the next birthday like? You know what I'm saying? Like, did I even want to go to that birthday? Is birthday even an exciting event for me? Right? Right. And I apologize to my daughter because I wasn't a great father. I appreciate that did not have good parenting training, and I carry that into the generations. But fortunately, I got insights. I got coaching certificates. I got Ronnie. I got Jillian. I got all of you as my support group, so I can kind of get into the loving mode. So let's get down into the loving mode. I want you to understand that whether it's a family, whether it's an organization or a community, this model is the go-to model. Is the go-to model. If you can't do that, you can talk about the wheel of life all you want. You can talk about the antenarrative bees, but without a conflict model, you can't do the following kind of phases. Story listening, storytelling groups, story circles, antenarrative mapping, the wheel of life, diagnostics, raw materials, reality, restoring, coherence building, quantum storytelling, the multi-temporality that I talked about. So in this breakout session, I'd like you to apply we'll just have a big group because I don't want to delay the thing, but I want to ask you about doing something, me doing something, not you doing something. You do whatever you want to do. But what I want to do is get with the insight people and go into communities and travel there and not just work with veterans and their family, but all families, all communities, all organizations. So I'm the big picture guy, and do some microstoria workshops, do some workshops on mirroring. That's where one group mirrors the other group. You keep them apart till they do the mirroring. And there's other things Grace Ann and I have done, such as having a ballroom or a gymnasium, having people closest to you or the new hires further away. You draw chalk lines or something. Those are the people there 20, 30 years, maybe 50, 80 years in a community, whatever, if it's a community, organization, family, and you have them talk from the back of the room first what that microstory was like. Then the next level, what that microstory is like, the next level till you get to the front of the room. Because this really helps break down the tensions and pressures. So what I'd like to hear now is some discussion of you not doing anything, but is it okay if I do this? Your turn. I will be quiet. You don't need to raise your hand. Just talk. You're all like congenial people.
One thing I thought about.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll go for it, Sabine.
I'm actually not quite sure what you are asking. Do you mean this in a larger sense, or do you mean this in the sense of in this group? Or I'm a little confused. I'm sorry.
Okay. Enthinkment is for thinking.
Okay.
I have a new website called storying.site. It's cheaper than .com. Storying.site. That's an action group. That's like sign up, volunteer. If you want to volunteer, I'll teach you conflict management. I'll teach you the 6 Bs. We'll do some microstoria with each other. Once we get set, then we volunteer to go in a community along with some insight people that live in that community. Insight people are all over the world. So, I could pull together 6 insight people from Cruces, 10 from Carlsbad, well, maybe 5. Hundreds from the Boston area, hundreds from New York, hundreds from Los Angeles. Los Angeles is their headquarters. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's possible they liked my strategy of having a group of volunteers go in a community, live there for a month or 2 months, do a series of workshops, some insight seminars, that sort of thing. I'm not an insight facilitator. You got to be sanctioned and certified for that. And they only have like 6 of them in the whole country. But you can do special assignments like working with a company or a family or a community. And that's what I want to do, special assignment. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So
that makes more sense because I wasn't sure what you were
asking. Enthinkment don't do anything different. But what I
Okay,
am doing,
okay. I was just confused about that. Thank you for clarifying.
but if you now go to the anti-narrative site, or you go to the together telling site, or you go to the storying.site, then you'll see that that's a site for, you want to join in, you want to volunteer, you want to donate, you want to do something, do it. You don't want to do anything, don't do anything. But
Okay,
some of us are
gotcha.
going to do something. Okay,
Okay,
next up was, who is next? Duncan, was
Duncan, I
it you?
think.
I actually
Thank you,
love the
Duncan.
idea of the conflict resolution model, but I did think about what Mary Parker Follett might say, especially with some of these conflicts. She said that integration is not always possible because some people lack the intelligence or creativity to integrate. And she said, furthermore, there are certain situations where integration is not possible. And she gives two examples. And I really wish I knew what led to those two examples. You talked about the microstory today. But in dynamic admin, she said, for example, if two people wish to buy the same house, no integration is possible. Likewise, if two men wish to marry the same woman, that also means there is no integration possible. Again, what happened?
He's not been to California, you know?
Well, I wondered, like, there surely must be an exception to those rules. But anyhow, but I did think, like, the idea is, I think, solid, but just sometimes, no matter how hard we try and no matter how strong we are, there's certain mission impossible, so to speak.
Yeah, so you're going to have people on the periphery. I agree with Mary Parker Follett, and I always agree with Duncan, but that you're not going to reach. But you're going to have a lot of people that want to have a loving, open heart in their community, and they want to act with a loving, open heart. They want to live in fear. They don't want to do this, and they're into hugging and talking, and they're willing to interact with you. The thing that we do in the conflict model is we keep the most divided groups separate for a long, long time before we ever try to put them in the same room. This is not the Jerry Springer show, you know, where we that's not where how we get excited. Betty.
You reminded me of a story I heard years ago about taking youth from Israel and Palestine and putting them into a 10-day wilderness experience. So
Yeah, that's a good example.
Wouldn't talk to each other, and by the end, doing ropes and all the ropes courses and all of that they just loved each other. So
yeah, we sent my younger brother Steve to one of those wilderness farm experiences in Brighton, England, or somewhere. That guy spoke with a British accent when he came home. I mean, my brother, he had manners at the table. He wasn't throwing mashed potatoes at everybody.
Yeah.
But I'll go to Betty because she wanted to say something. But thank you.
Yeah, Duncan's example made me realize that, in fact, David, when faculty, it's happened to me many times to be in a meeting in which the real problem was a lack of resources, and we were all vying for the same thing. So it's exactly the same thing when two people want the same wife. And quite often I could put my finger on why the department could have avoided the crisis from the start by announcing that because the budget has to be cut, he's going to work with everybody to make the most equitable. If you start out by saying, oops, some of you will get less money, but those who yell the loudest will get it, or the guy is going to get the girl who will be the most forceful. So we've got to remember that some conflict resolution should happen before the conflict ever starts.
You have to be invited into a family, a community, an organization. That's number one. Number two, when you're invited, like Grace Ann are invited to go to a hospital in Maine to work with their issues, conflict issues. All right. So we go there and we see what they've already resolved and what stages they're at and where the hot points are, just in our conversational inquiry and getting to know them and stuff, you know? I mean, that's over a few hours. I mean, these are gigs like bring in your best deconstructionist. That was me at the time, to deconstruct our hospital. And what are you going to do? But I'm using the same methodology Grace Ann and I are, and we do some of the same things. And when we were brought into a training organization or the physical science lab at the university, we did the mirroring thing with them. But it's a series of events over 5 months with that organization. You know what I mean? So this is step by step process. But yeah. Yeah, and then Mary Parker Follett is always right, But Mary Parker Follett was one of the best negotiators for organizational change in the world in her time, and she deserves Academy Awards and all that. So what else do we want to talk about in our last 4 minutes?
This reminds me of two things. One is when you were saying, David, about how there are people who want to hug each other. I mean, it has to do with what they consider their community, which again has
Yeah.
to do with what level of consciousness they're at. Lower levels, they only think about people in their own tribe. It's not till you get to like higher levels when they start to want to connect with others. The other thing might seem off the wall, but I started watching Star Trek Academy. And it's really good because it talks about exactly this. In the first episode, you have these people that can't stand each other, but then a crisis happens and they all work together. By the second episode, they go back to not really standing each other, but towards the end, it gets a little better. And they also had a whole thing about one planet or one group of planets wanting to gotten along with the other one in years, and by the end of the thing, they're getting along together. So I recommend it. And I'm sure you can figure out a way to put it into your model, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's Lou Pondy's model, that part of it, but it's a model that Ronnie and I revised substantially and tied it into Heidegger, into we had the first statement of the seven B's in that book, and so that came out in 23, so 22 years or something for that to come out, and then we're hoping, I've done a whole inventory. If you go to, this link to the document I showed you is at enthinkment.com, and it's also at storying dot site. So you can see the whole list of references which I've added to the anti-narrative website publications as well. Because I want a special issue to happen, in my field. And why does it take 24, 25 years to develop a new idea in academia before it gets a special issue? It's because the people that are running the journals didn't grow up with it. And then the people that are on the board didn't grow up with it. And the reviewers didn't get taught it in school. So you're dealing with several obstacles. So I would like to see that happen. Why? Not because it's anti-narrative is anything that cool, um, but if we don't use terms like microstoria and we don't become microstorians, how can we even help communities or families? You know what I mean? All these instant cookbook things. Go up and put post-it notes on the wall. Reorganize the post-it notes. Oh, now you're going to be a happy family. You're going to be a great organization. We're going to put these post-it notes together. I'm going, God, 40 fucking years of bullshit. Give it a rest. And that's why Jerry Bieberman, is he still here? Yeah. That's why Jerry Bieberman, I had him do an abstract for that special issue for a really fine journal, in fact, two fine journals. And Jerry said, "What do you mean org development? Org development hasn't worked in 20 years. No org development model really works. These people who stand up in their auditoriums and they get big license fees and they do all this stuff. Did they save Walmart? Yeah. Did they save Sears? No. Did they save Kmart? No. Did they save anybody? No. Does anybody really use that stuff? No."
Well, that's the other big issue. When you were talking about it takes all that time to get into a journal that nobody reads anyway, and then you skip the last part, which is then they do a meta-analysis on it, and that whatever the theory is was thrown out the window. So you got like a 40 or 50-year cycle of the most popular stuff that nobody reads and nobody cares. especially the academic stuff. But the other thing that I would add, though, is if you go into an organization, you need to use terms that people would understand what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. But this is a
You
think tank. I can use any
know?
term I want here.
I know, but then you have to translate it into terms that they will understand.
No, yeah, but this isn't an application group. This is
I know, I'm
this
just.
thinking. But in the other thing, like Growth OD on Mondays, it's like, don't you dare use a term like microstoria. Don't you dare use an anti-narrative word, you know?
You can use it, but you got to explain it.
Yeah, then you explain for an hour and they still don't understand because they haven't read anything. So that's not really going to work, you know?
But that's the other problem. Nobody reads any. Well, anyway, so
Oh, so Olivia, you going to explain neuro-linguistic programming to an audience, NLP, and how that all works in 10 minutes and then do it? No, it's impossible, you know? Anyway, we've had a lot of fun. I'm a minute over. So anyway, that's what I'm up to. But next time I'm up on Enthinkment, I'll be thinking about something else. But I am got a good head of steam for the doing a webinar at the end of the month. So I took all your feedback. I'm gonna do a webinar, and I'm gonna do it on helping, loving, opening heart. I'm not gonna use big ass words, but it is gonna be, you know, something helpful. I won't go through the whole conflict model, but I know the model in my whole brain. I don't need to go through it, but I need to know how to do it, you know? That's the thing they train you in when you pay $4, $5, $6, $8,000. They train you in what it is and how to define it. They don't train you in how to do it. They don't give that away for less than 50,000, you know? But I'm talking about raising money with the 501c3 at Purview, and all I got to do is write an amendment to the charter of the Purview and say, well, I'm going to do not just veterans, but families of any kind, communities of any kind. Oh, I got a good story to share. As we're out here. Do not hug a doctoral student from Morocco. Okay. A female. They are not allowed to hug. Okay. That was the one exception to the rule. And then there's other communities too where you don't hug.
Yeah, explicit
Ask permission to hug your daughter.
ongoing consent. Seems pretty good.
oh, yes.
Yeah. You remember Khadijah? You know, went to her wedding reception and got to dance with her. But for about 4 or 5 years as a doctoral student, you weren't allowed to touch her at all. It's no touching. Anyway, I don't know why that's a good story to end on, but be careful who you hug and ask for permission. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to stop recording.
Enthusiastic ongoing consent.